back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Robert Paylor, inspirational speaker and author. Been looking forward to this as I follow him on the socials and been looking at following is redundant at this point, but following your journey throughout this recovery. Really excited to speak with you today.
Justin, so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. This will be fun.
Yeah, so normally this is a coaching deal where I ask about your coaching background and athletics and all that, but this is going to go a little different direction, but we're going to use the same theme in regards to framing the journey, right? Athletics, obviously, a part of how we got where we are, but let's start at the beginning. Take us through your background and take us through the story up to where we're at now that you got a book coming out and you're on the speaking tour, and just get us caught up.
Yeah, a lot of exciting stuff. So broad strokes on me, from the Sacramento area, as we were chatting before this podcast. So just growing up, I remember it was hot summers and sports. Those are my memories. And I just grew up always having a baseball bat in my hand or some kind of ball that I was throwing around. And growing up, I always played the traditional big three American sports: football, basketball, baseball. Loved it, but really had a knack for contact. I was always the biggest guy in my class and knew just how to move my weight around, had that aggression and fire. So football was really where I saw myself having a future. I wanted to go play collegiately. And my goal was like, I really just want to be on TV. When I was like 10 years old, I was like, I just want to be like on a TV with a football game one day. And anyways, I go over to Jesuit high school. I play football, doing great, basketball, doing great. Baseball season comes around and I'm like, I don't know, I'm getting pretty tired here. And so I dropped that. But then in my sophomore year, football season ends. It's time to start thinking about basketball again. And I was starting to think about the future a little bit because I liked being a dual sport athlete. And I was starting at my grade and on the JV team would have started. But in the grade above me going into varsity, there was a guy who was like 6'10", another dude who was 6'8", and they weren't just bodies, they could ball. And I'm like a measly 6'5", just a little dude. And I was thinking, like, even if I make this team, I'm probably going to ride the pine for a year and I'm not going to do this in college or something. So let me take a step back and evaluate. And Jesuit High School has an incredible rugby program, more national championships than any other team in the nation. I think it's at 10 national championships. Then they started competing in 1999. Really like amazing culture. And they're not just winning, but they're having a great time. Everybody loves playing for this team. And I'm thinking, okay, like I said, I really enjoy contact sports. And what a cool opportunity to be part of such a successful program. I'm going to give this a shot. So didn't play basketball that year, went out to play rugby. Best decision I ever made in my life. I fell in love with it. And I'm like, oh man, it feels pretty nice to be able to like move around and not have all those pads on. And, you know, it's not like plays are being called for you. You have a system that you develop, but it's on you as a player to implement it. And it's this free flowing game. And then afterwards, like we're getting together with the team, we're, you know, having meals or sharing stories. It's not like you play each other once and you're mortal enemies for life. It's like that bond and that experience actually brought us closer together. I loved it. And Jesuit has been quite a pipeline over to the UC Berkeley team, which is the most successful collegiate rugby program in America. At the time, 33 national championships, with the tournament only even having existed for about 50 years. So you can look at any team at any level in America. And I think the only team that has more hardware than us is the Harlem Globetrotters. And their games are rigged. Like we're not playing the Washington Generals every week here. So we're doing all right. And I go over to play for Cal. And my freshman year, I'm putting in my time, doing my reps, developing, not starting. And then by my sophomore year, the position that I play called lock, which is usually like the bigger guys out there on the field, kind of like tight end body type, gets opened up. And it's up for someone to raise their hand and show that they really want it. And I worked hard and I got it. So I'm starting as a sophomore for this amazing program, which was not an easy or common thing to do. It was very much my goal after that to go be able to play internationally, to be able to represent the United States. These were my dreams that I was pushing for. And while we'll never know what happened, I was on the track to making that happen. And we eventually get our way to competing for a national championship game, which would be Cal's 31st national title. And this is where my life all changed. It was May 6th of 2017. And I remember waking up that morning. I got the jitters, as we all do before a big game. We get dressed. We have our kind of pregame chat in the hotel before we get on the bus. Pretty calm, honestly. It's very much like a been there, done that kind of approach for us. We've worked hard all season to get to this moment. There's nothing new we're going to figure out here. Now we just go out and we perform. And we're playing Arkansas State on this day. And I'm not an American rugby historian, but I don't think they've ever won a national championship. And like I said, we're going for number 31. We felt really confident going into this game, did an extensive film analysis, and we knew their strengths, what to look out for, their weaknesses, and our game plan to exploit them. And it was very early on in this game, about a minute and a half in, that I start competing in a maul, which is when the bigger guys, we group up in one unit and then we push to advance the ball. And the defense's job is to come straight in and stop our momentum moving forward. Very much a boiler room, very much where the big guys thrive. And I was a big guy, 6'5", 245 pounds. I'm like the biggest guy on this field. This is my moment. I'm like drooling here on the field, thinking, let's go, Rob, drive this thing in. But then as I do that, the opposing players start making illegal moves and the referee's not calling anything. So 3 players coming from the side of the maul, which are infractions. Can't do that, but the ref doesn't call it. And then the first guy who comes in, their number 8, binds me in a headlock. So he's got my chin pinned down to my chest with my shoulders forward. That's an automatic or yellow or red card. You do that, you are gone from the game. Who knows what the ref saw or didn't see, but he didn't call it. And I keep driving forward. I'm just going to do my assignment. As I do that, there's another player who chops my legs down. So I start falling, but that arm lock around my neck, it's tight. I can't get my head up. I remember I braced for impact. I closed my eyes, I gripped my teeth, but then I felt this god awful crunch in my neck. My forehead slams against my chest, gets pinned there. And then it's just poof. I open my eyes, and I didn't go unconscious. I was totally clear and aware as all this was going on. But first, I just like instinctually try to pop up. On rugby, you get down, you bump up really quickly, being that it's such a continuous game. So instinctually, I just try to move and nothing's happening. Okay, take a mental inventory here. My whole body is buzzing, like that feeling where, you know, you took a nap on the couch, you wake up and your arms all pins and needles and stuff. That, as intense as you can imagine, everywhere in my body instantaneously after that crunch. And I start thinking like, okay, now maybe just try to move your hips over. Nothing. Okay, maybe just focus on like your leg. Nothing. I'm looking at my hand. Okay, lift your arm. Nothing. Wiggle a finger. Nothing. Keep in mind, the game is still going on around me. The referee did not stop play. So they're playing rugby within 3 meters of me in multiple phases. The medical staff sprints out there, create a barricade around me, because if a player fell on me, my injury certainly would have been worse. I could have died. And we score on them, and we start taking a mental inventory. And my trainers and doctors, they're like, Robert, can you feel this? Just poking all over my body. Nothing. Can you move this? Wiggle your toes. Squeeze my finger. Nothing. And I just think like, I'm in a nightmare. And I can't wake up. This is every athlete's worst nightmare, to be paralyzed from the neck down. And I thought it was it. Here I am, 20 years old, and I can't move or feel anything below my neck. And I just envisioned myself sitting in a chair, unable to move anything. My mom's just going to spoon feed me, keep me alive for the rest of her life until she dies. And then I'll have to hire a caregiver or something that will just keep me alive. I won't be able to go back to school. I won't be able to play rugby again. I'm not graduating. I can't have a career. I probably won't ever get married. Who wants to marry into something like this? I'm not going to have a family. There seemed like there was a reality where it was just over. And I didn't get a lot of hope after that, because I go over to the hospital. We take our medical imaging, MRI, CT scan, X-ray. Doctor comes back, bad look on his face, very matter of fact. He says, Robert, your injury is bad, really bad. And the reality is you will never walk again. You will never move your hands. And we're going to do our best so that one day you can do something like pick up a piece of pizza and bring it to your face. And if you can just feed yourself, you beat all the odds. He also recommends a potentially life-threatening surgery to me, being spinal fusion surgery. He explains that it's my best chance at stability and recovery, but there's a lot of important real estate right here. Things can go wrong quickly. And he told me I had an hour of whether or not I would go into the surgery. So I'm sitting here thinking, I woke up thinking this was going to be the best day of my life. And now I don't know if it's even going to be my last day or not. And I didn't have a lot on my side. I didn't have a doctor saying that everything was going to be okay. I didn't have statistics that were really showing hope or any signs of life propping up. But I had that athlete's mindset, and I had that hope within me that if I give everything I have and I'm in the top 1% of workers at this injury, then I might be able to be in the top 1% of outcomes in this recovery. And it was like, that's what I have to focus on. And I made that decision. I decided to go into that surgery. It was very successful. The doctor did a wonderful job. After that, I had to fight for my life. I couldn't swallow, so I couldn't eat or drink. I got pneumonia and I was unable to cough because of my diaphragm weakness. I lost 60 pounds that first month, and death was just sitting there in that room waiting for me to quit. I did not give up. I kept fighting and I got better. And then I eventually get transported over to a new hospital outside of Denver, Colorado. It's called Craig Hospital. They specialize in spinal cord injury and traumatic brain injury recovery. Totally different outlook at this place. Like the patients like have smiles on their faces and they're like, Robert, welcome. You're going to love it here. And you're kind of like, blink twice. You need me to help you get out of here. What is going on? Are they drugging you? This is insane. But the doctors just had such a different approach. They look at me and they're like, what happened to you? It's terrible, but we don't know where you're going to progress from here. You might walk out of these doors one day and you very well might not. But what I can guarantee you is we're going to give you everything that modern science and medicine has to optimize this recovery. You've got the full strength and support of this team. And they just opened that door where it was like that hope. It wasn't a guarantee of anything, but it was a guarantee that they would be with me every step of this journey. We were going to fight with everything that we had and everything that science could give us. And we went for it. 8 to 9 hours of very intense rehabilitation a day, hardest I've ever worked at something in my life. And I went from coming in that hospital, paralyzed from the chest down, to where I could twitch a finger, and then I twitched a toe. And a year later, I got up out of my wheelchair into my walker and I walked out of the hospital doors. And I got back to UC Berkeley 1 year after my injury. I kept doing my rehab with one of my rugby coaches, Tom Billups, who runs the strength and conditioning for the Cal rugby team. He got together with me for like an hour and a half, 5 days a week, and we get after it in the gym. And I didn't let up. And I continued to see recovery. I graduated. I got my degree standing up on my feet and threw that sheepskin in the air as hard as I could. And here I am now. I can stand up out of my wheelchair, into my walker on my own. For anybody who can see the video, I can move my fingers, I can move my hands, and I can walk up to 400 yards in my walker. And I'm now on this journey of inspirational speaking, sharing my story, sharing the tools that have helped me in this journey, because we've all got a challenge. And that is like my Empire State elevator speech of just how this life has gone and where we are today.
For those of you that haven't heard the story, now you've heard it. And while you are processing that, I'm gonna dive into a couple things that came front of mind for me. How, in that moment, if we go back to that hour that you had to decide, right? And you mentioned that there wasn't a lot of hope, but it's like, how do you find hope in that situation when there's none that you can see? And as part of that, I'm also sitting here curious, going, all right, you got hurt. What are the chances that you happen to be taken to a hospital where somebody existed that could perform this operation? And as you catalog the dominoes that kind of had to fall in place to give you that 1% chance, talk a little bit about that in hindsight, right? Where you're trying to think through how this thing went horribly sideways. And at the same time, there were some things that lined up that allow you to be where you are right now.
Oh, there was so much that lined up. Number one, I started out at a great hospital. So I was competing in Santa Clara when I had my injury, just so happens that Santa Clara Valley Medical Center is one of the best when it comes to these operations, really on the cutting edge. I was really lucky in that regard. So had an awesome surgeon who really helped me out there. Battling pneumonia when you can barely breathe is not good. It's like borderline death sentence. So their ability to keep me going when I couldn't eat and I couldn't breathe, huge credit to them. Had to have that, right? And then eventually to be able to have folks reach out to me saying, get your butt over to Craig Hospital, and then having the financial resources to do it too. That was another big part, is we had to start up a GoFundMe campaign, because as you can imagine, breaking your neck is not a good financial decision. It's expensive. So we needed help, and it's just amazing the support that we received, way beyond anything I ever would have hoped or dreamed of. And then beyond that, like amazing family support. My family was just always there for me. Amazing rugby team support. Like I talk about our associate head coach and strength and conditioning coach, Tom Billups, helping me out when I got back to Cal. Who does that? So when you look at the amount of championships that a coach has won in rugby, number one is Jack Clark, who's our head coach. And then number two is Tom Billups, who is our associate head coach. And I didn't say like winningest for Cal, I said America. They're both there. So you have Tom Billups, the second most winningest rugby coach in America, in the gym helping me walk again. Who does that? I'm so lucky to have people like that. And then you got my rugby team, who, when I got hurt and came back to Cal, for the folks who haven't been over to Berkeley or kind of the San Francisco area, it's hills for days. They make movies out of these things. And I don't care who you are. You could be like the Lance Armstrong of wheelchair pushing. The hills are going to win eventually. And I needed help. And what my rugby teammates did is they put together my entire schedule on a live updating spreadsheet, and they had all my classes and my workouts, and they'd sign up for slots on the spreadsheet and push me around the campus. And it's very easy to say I would not have graduated if it weren't for the rugby team's help. And I just look at all those kind of dominoes falling together of just the people that have helped me along this way and the places I was able to get. Yeah, I could not have done what I've done today if it weren't for those opportunities. That's just like an important lesson in this, that we just can't do anything important alone. And we have to intentionally seek help and assistance when we have a challenge in front of us. There's just so much more that we can do when we seek the support of others. Yeah, so that, I'm not 1% there. But and then you also asked about like the first hour after my injury, when I'm getting this really bad news about my recovery and stuff. And there's two things that really helped me. One was the foundation I had built mentally as an athlete. So competed for some very high performing teams, and achieving that level of success isn't something that just happens every year. I mean, you push for it when you're seeking to really be that outlier. And it just was not ever instilled in me to give up. And when you're going into kind of like that fourth quarter time and you're down, you don't give up, you push harder. And it was just that same kind of mentality. It was like, if there's some infinitesimally small chance that I can beat this, that's what I'm focusing on. That's what I'm going for. And it was confirmed in a conversation I had with my spiritual director before my surgery. I called him to ask for some prayers. And he gave me this piece of advice that just really gave me hope in a hopeless situation. And he said, throughout this journey, there's going to be a lot of things you can't control. But the one thing you always have control over is your mindset and your positivity, your ambition, your willingness to wake up every day and fight is up to you. This injury can't take that away from you. It's something that was so simple. It wasn't easy, but it was simple. And it was something that I could focus on. That there's so many things I can't control right now, but I can control how I move forward with each step I'm taking in front of me. I don't have to take a look at this whole mountain of a task I have in front of me. I'm just going to look down at my feet and take that one step. And that really helped me in that early decision to just keep moving forward.
Yeah. So we talk about that a lot as coaches, right? Control the controllables. How do you focus on that versus worrying about the things that you can't? And that, to
Yeah.
your point, it's not easy, but it's simple. In those moments when it's not easy, over the course of, I think you posted yesterday, you're almost to 2,900 days. Maybe you're past that. I don't remember the exact number, but
Yeah.
if that's almost 10 years at this point, 8 to 10 years.
Coming up on
Uh,
8. Yep.
yeah. What are some sound bites, some reminders that you keep in your cookie jar at this point, to quote David Goggins, to keep going each day when you're getting distracted by the things that aren't in your control. It's just
Yeah.
inevitable. So how do you bring yourself back to center? What are some of the reminders that you give yourself when it's especially hard to stop
Yeah.
focusing on the things that are out of your control?
That soundbite, biggest one, man, I should tattoo this on my body somewhere. It's compared to what? I love that saying. It's a form of practicing perspective. And it's so powerful, just like to have that little quick flip of the switch where I can be like, snap out of it. And I'm finding myself complaining. I'm finding myself focusing on things that I can't control, things that aren't going my way. And just try to look outside of myself a little bit. First, you can do that through your own experiences, like compared to what? Okay, what have I overcome in the past? Because sometimes I think we need to remember we've made it through 100% of our hard days to get where we are right now. And I think that's a good mindset to have. Okay, compared to what? What are the like times when I was really worried in the past, when I felt like I couldn't overcome a task? And how did it end up turning out? That's one. But I think really importantly, we need to look at the struggles that others are going through. And I'm talking significant stuff. I'm talking about people who are battling cancer, people who are battling quadriplegia, veterans who are coming back from war without limbs. Taking some time to sit down, doesn't have to be long, to listen to their stories. There's tons of them online, to really have some empathy, looking outside of ourselves, connect our struggles and to what they go through, and be able to say that again, compared to what? There's a lot that I can do, and there's a lot that I do have. So I think it helps us not to, I don't want to dismiss our challenges. I think that's really unhealthy, but just put them into perspective to realize that what we go through is overcomable. There's so much that we can achieve. So that phrase right there, I think it really helps us stop thinking about kind of that woe is me type mindset and start focusing on what I do have and what I can do with it.
Yeah. So I want to go back into what some you just said because there was almost this aspect before you said I don't want to dismiss the challenges. So you said
Yeah.
compared to what? People with cancer, people that are facing quadriplegia. You were there. Like when this
Mm-hmm.
thing first happened, like that was you, right?
Yeah.
Until they did this surgery. So
Yeah.
how has that now motivated you, or how has that shined a light on possibilities? So you mentioned I want to be part of the 1% of outcomes, but
Yeah.
you're compared to what started at an elitely bad level. And now you've gotten to in one that's tolerable for you, right? You're
Yeah.
grinding on this thing, but like one of the references you just shared, that was you however many years ago. And now you're moving the needle a little bit. Talk a little bit about that component.
Yeah, someone always has it worse is the phrase, right? And I mean, it's like cliche, but it's true. And I remember when I got to Craig Hospital, I was on the top floor, is the fourth floor, and the one below us was the traumatic brain injury floor. And here I am, I had plenty to complain about, right? I was going from D1 athlete, national champion, to I can't scratch my nose, I can't feed myself, I can't go to the bathroom by myself. Everything that was like my pride and purpose is gone. But like I always had my mind, and I had that perspective on the floor below. I remember Coach Clark and Billups came to visit me in Colorado, and I was going down the hallway, and I was like, yeah, I go through a lot. We were talking about what they go through. And I'm like, I go through a lot, but I'm still me. And I just heard stories of these folks where they didn't know who their parents were anymore. They hardly even understood who they themselves were. They're like hurting themselves. They're so scared and confused. They can't speak. And for me, I got dealt a tough deck of cards, but I always maintained my mind. And that's something where I was just like, oh boy, there's people in the same building as me right now who would give anything to be in my situation and trade spots. So somebody's always got it worse. There's something that we have that they don't. There's something that they have that we don't. We just have to keep looking outside ourselves and really access that empathy we have.
How have you, on this journey to try to maintain that mindset of productivity, had to prune the company you keep, so to speak? Because you talk about like you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with, and you
Yeah.
are working through a situation that I have to imagine has a delicate balance of positivity and
Yeah.
empathy and pity, and you got to manage the noises that are coming in. How have you had to
Right.
navigate that over the last 8 years in regard to
Yeah.
figuring out how to make sure you got the right environment around you?
Critically important, something that we all need to be really conscious of. I'm so happy that you brought that up. because I think a lot of us just go wherever the wind takes us. And we need to treat that like a muscle. And I use the term a mental diet. As athletes and people who are in this space, we're all very conscious about what we put into our bodies and our physical diet. And it's nasty in, nasty out, right? But if you eat well, you perform better. And I think the same thing goes for our minds. We have to be really intentional about the quality of information that's coming into our mindset, the people that we're surrounding ourselves with, and having an audit of when negativity hits us to be able to identify that, to neutralize it, but then have some habitual things that we're doing every day to give ourselves that positivity, whether that's people that we try to get together with on a daily basis or talk with on the phone, that's podcasts that we're listening to, books that we're reading that keep us above that equilibrium line so that when something bad does strike us, and it will, we're able to respond constructively to that and aren't already in this pity party sort of state. So that mental diet, really important. And that started very early on. I couldn't even hold my phone, but I'd ask my brother to hold the phone in front of me and we'd scroll through messages from supporters. We'd look up people who have been in a situation like mine before and they saw physical healing or mental, emotional healing, like that stuff that I really needed to see in my life. It gave me that hope and something to fight for. We need to treat that our mind a muscle. And if you just let it go, it's going to atrophy and it's going to get weaker. But as you intentionally work on that, it gets stronger. You get more resilient and you build that positivity that you've got to have in your life.
How have you discovered I'm going to use the word balance again because I don't have a better word, but the balance between the advice and guidance you're getting from the experts, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mental wherewithal you have as a lifetime athlete that thinks you can do anything, and the tipping point of borderline psycho, again, like Goggins, where you got a broken leg, let me just run through it. We're like, what have you found along this path of how to have a balance of where you're getting your guidance from, right? Because
Yeah.
in this age of information being at everybody's disposal, right? You can end up down the wrong rabbit hole, right? So you got to kind
Yep.
of figure that out. How have you learned to navigate that over the last 8 years?
Yeah, really important to have that balance because I met a lot of folks who were not in balance and they'd have an injury like mine, almost the same thing, but they just couldn't come to terms with it. And they'd be like, I am not a quadriplegic. This just isn't me. And I'm going to walk out of these hospital doors in a month. And because they weren't in tune with their reality and how much it was going to take, they obviously didn't get better and they were stuck in that denial. It's good to have big goals, but it's also really good to be in tune with where we're at. And I had so much time to think about that. But it's not like I was trying to like regrow a limb here or something that was just like physically impossible. My chances of walking again were 1% or less. Definitely with where I started and where I am now, I've made it into that kind of 1% statistical category, but it wasn't impossible. And I was going to go for it. But here's the thing too, is that I'm still in a wheelchair and I hoist myself into a wheelchair every day for the last 2,897 days. And there is a very real chance, probably even likely chance, that I'll spend the rest of my life working at this recovery and I will never be wheelchair independent. And I know that. I will fight like hell to make sure that doesn't happen. I will get out of this wheelchair one day or I will die trying. But I know there's a very real possibility that might happen. And I'd be okay with that because I gave it everything that I had. And if I don't make it to that point, I kept my body as healthy as possible. I took everything that this recovery would give me. And in the process, I tried to share it with the world to help people who are overcoming their own sorts of adversities. And that kind of showed me like what true success in this is, that it's not just about the physical accomplishments and taking as many steps as possible. It's about taking everything that this injury did to break me and turning it into a gift that I can share with other people. So even if I don't ever walk again, I don't think that means that I failed and that this injury beat me. I think I've really thrived through this because I've given it everything that I have. I can put my head on the pillow at the end of the night, knowing that I put forth a full effort at this and I used it to benefit someone else's life, which is so much more important to me than going from point A to point B on my feet. So I think that's important when setting that goal too, that it's not just all about yourself, but it's also about benefiting someone else. So just go for it, empty the tank, and try to root that into selfless purpose.
How do you feel that the counting serves? What are the ups and downs of that number in the back of your head like that? 2897. At what point does that become a rock too heavy to carry versus
Mm.
it being the motivational piece that it seems to be right now?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's at first, it was that rock that's too heavy to carry. So I would think back then it was like really easy to count. It's 15 days or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I've gone through this for 15 days. Can you imagine not being able to move your body for 15 days? And it wasn't really a badge of honor. It was more like this burden that I've been carrying. And then they would have people come into the hospital as kind of like mentors who have had this injury for a while. They're like on 20 years. I don't even want to try to do the math on that. And they would be like, sorry, it would be so inspirational. And the way that they did wear it as like a badge of honor, they're like, I can go through this for 20 years and it will not break me. And I thought, how freaking cool. So I started like counting these days and making every day count. That if I don't post a rehab video and I don't get on my feet, I'm like, it got the best of me. Like I missed an opportunity there. I want to be able to post that video online of me getting on my feet, getting after it on day 2,897, saying, this thing won't break me. So as I hit day 3,000 and like these huge milestones, I'm just even more proud of it. And I love sharing that because that's an important part of this. It's not just like those big milestones where, I hit a big goal and I can share that. I think the most impressive thing about all of this is just that daily grind and being really consistent with it. And that's just true for all of us, right? That whenever we want anything, it's not just short bursts of intensity, it's just consistency over long periods of time. So counting those days has been something that's helped me.
Yeah, no, that's great because
Mhm.
every morning when I see your post and then you just mention it again, I was like, it's curious how that's having an impact. So I like the way that you've
Yeah.
spun that to be a motivating factor to keep
Yeah.
you on the path. This one's going to be a little bit in the rabbit hole, and feel free to pass and we can move on. But I am not the science guy. I'm not the medical guy. I am curious to the extent that you can what the prognosis looks like for recovery in general, not in your specific
Mhm.
case or in your specific case, but if, and this is where again, naive, you had the surgery, the spinal fusion, which I would imagine would try to reattach whatever was getting in the way or preventing you from having use. What is the actual process, science? Like, why is it so hard or impossible, or it's not impossible, clearly, but
Mhm.
for the usage to come back based on that injury if they surgically repair it?
Yeah, we know a lot about why people have paralysis. It's recovering from it. That's where there's still so much that we don't know. So for me, what happened? My forehead slams against my chest. All that pressure caused the disc in between my C5-6 vertebrae to rupture into my spinal cord. Just that fiber optic cable of nerves that runs from our brainstem down our spine and branches off throughout our entire body, kind of sending that signal that our brain creates to our muscles and to our sensory system, bouncing them back and forth, keeping everything moving. So when I had all that pressure going to my spinal cord and had some fracturing at the vertebrae above and below it, there's a lot of swelling that occurred because it's so dense. The myelin sheath, which is the outer coating around your nerves, disintegrated. So like an electrical wiring that doesn't have any sort of sheath helping to conduct that electricity. Same thing happens with our living wires of nerves. The signal gets lost. Now, what makes it so chronic is that, like any other injury, our bodies develop scar tissue instead of actually just letting it be open and rebuilding it right there. Scar tissue cannot conduct those signals. And the problem is, so when I went to that surgery, they actually don't attempt to reconnect anything. They just cast the vertebrae together so that you can't move it around, that it gives you that real support for regeneration. Like they used to like have halos that they put into your skull and to keep you stationary so you could heal. It's like an invasive form of that. And it's nice that you don't have to have screws drilled into your skull. So that's essentially what they did there. But you can scrape away that scar tissue and more is just going to continue to develop. It's just the way that our bodies work. So with these spinal cord injuries, if you just get your spinal cord completely severed clean through, you have nothing connected, then you can't survive because your autonomic system will shut down. Your heart stops breathing, all those things just shut down. For me, I had an incomplete injury. So I could not move anything, but I had deep pressure sensations. Like you could put a knife in my leg and it wouldn't hurt, but I'd be like, there's something there that I can feel. In these injuries, things become really relative, and relatively, that was actually a good thing that I had those signals connected. There's, I'd say, three ways that you can have spinal cord injury recovery that I know of and understand. One is that sometimes your nerves will just go dormant under all that trauma and you wake them back up. So they're not severed, they're still connected, they just went dormant. So through repetitive motions, really intense activity over periods of time, you can get them to wake up and reconnect. The other way is your nerves regrowing. Now, I believe it's the slowest growing organism in the body. It's not something you can really count on. You got that scar tissue factor too. So the third that we've had a lot more study on recently, and I think was really important in mine, is neuroplasticity, or the rewiring of your nervous system. Our nervous system is highly interconnected. So there's not just one route or one nerve pathway that can get you to a certain muscle group. So as I was thinking of opening my hand and activating these muscles in my forearm, the route that was used to be able to open my hand was toast, gone. But over those thousands, millions of repetitions that I did, your brain starts to experiment with, okay, maybe I jump off the main highway here, take a back road and connect back on and can find that pathway again. That's where you get that little twitch in your finger. You branch it out to the rest of your hand. You start building the strength of the signal. And then you have to combat that atrophy that's occurred as you were just laying there motionless. And that's theoretically the form of recovery that you can achieve. A lot of it has to do with the severity of your injury. There are no two injuries that are the same. It is not just about how hard you work. It's the matter and severity of your injury means a lot, and just the way that your body's responding to these treatments. But it's absolutely fascinating, and we keep learning more. So there's exciting stuff going on in the space.
Yeah, quick follow up, and then we're going to pivot from this.
Yeah.
Seems like just watching your videos and talking right now that at least from chest up, arm up, you got pretty good mobility and control.
Yeah.
And I guess my curiosity, is it just the distance that those signals need to travel that's keeping the legs from working similarly? Or is it just they haven't rewired? Or who the hell knows? Because you seem to have pretty good movement, thinking you wouldn't originally up top.
Yeah, it's interesting. Distance, I think, does play a little bit of factor in some of this. It's a good sign if you have motion all the way down to your toes, because then you're just filling in the gaps in between, like in that recovery process. So I can move my toes pretty well too, actually. Those are also really small muscle groups. So like the size of the muscle also matters, and like how much work it needs to exert. So you obviously need to be able to recruit a lot more power in your quads and your glutes, like these big muscle groups, than you do, say, in your hands or your toes, little things like that. So I think that's meaningful. And then it's also just like the nerves that were damaged in your injury. So there'll be like central cord injuries, is what they're called, where people will regain their ability to walk really well. But if they need to lift a spoon to their face, they can't do it. So you'd see them like walking on the street. You would never have a clue what they're dealing with, but their arms have just been so much more affected by it purely because of how their spinal cord got hurt. So a lot of it has to do with just like where the trauma was done in the injury.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Let me go back to this piece about having the wherewithal to continue to climb the hill here. You mentioned the influence your coaches have had over your career in mindset training, in skill development, and all of that. And one of the things that thematically over 240 episodes has come up when I ask people about their journey as a coach is that focusing on the relationship piece eventually becomes much more important than the X's and O's, right? So when you're young, it's I'm going to go do this to win the game, and all this energy goes into prep. And then as you get more experience, it's, yeah, that's all cool. But like the relationship you have with your athletes goes far beyond anything else you can do. How has that proven true for you, both as a competitive athlete in the mix and now in recovery as you're getting a chance to reflect on your journey and some of these things that you've been able to both achieve and experience from that standpoint. And the root of the question, Robert, is more about advising the listenership of, look, you have tremendous opportunity to influence young people. This is where your energy should be spent.
Yeah, yeah. You bring up such a good point. It's so true in the teams that I've been able to play on and how it's worked in my player coach relationships that I have in more of a physical therapy standpoint now. It's very similar to that. I think it's all about buy-in. And you can have the greatest X's and O's possible, the greatest strategies and plans, but if your team isn't bought in, they're not going to be able to execute in a way that a team that just fully believes in this mission has strong relationships between player and coach, player to player, alumnus of the program, stuff like that. Just feeling like you're playing for something bigger than yourself. And I got that on all these rugby teams I competed for. And it was interesting. Over at the Jesuit High School program, our head coach at the time was John Shorey, extremely successful. And it was almost like he was my friend too. And I loved this guy. And he's, hey, Robert, I need you to run through this brick wall for me. I'd say, like, where is it at? I was in for it. And we were so bought into something bigger than ourselves, right? We're holding this legacy that is unparalleled anywhere else. And there's an alumni community that's counting on us. And we're playing for the players that are going to come after for us as well. And we'd watch game footage from like old games and hear stories about the big games that they had and the successes and the champions that they made and the success that they had later on in their rugby careers, competing for the United States and internationally. It just makes you feel like I'm a part of something so big here that it's not just about whether I'm starting or not, or whether I'm the one scoring the touchdown or he's the one scoring the touchdown. It's about this team having success and us doing it together and making that sacrifice, working harder for this greater purpose. And then I go over to Cal, different coaching environment, very much so, to where it was very clear, like from between player and coach, like we're not just like best buddies here telling jokes and stuff like that. In fact, they were very clear at Cal Rugby that we are not a family. A lot of people will say this team is a family. They would very explicitly say this team is not a family. Families are built on unconditional love. This is a very conditional environment here. It's a meritocracy. And if you don't perform, you're not going to play. So it was different in that regard. And like, I really respect that. And I think it's true. But from that, we were so aware of what we were fighting for too, that bigger than yourself type mentality. And that created the buy-in to where when we're doing early morning trainings, we're giving it our all. And if we're ever down in a game, I mean, there's just that greater sense of urgency that it's not just about losing a rugby game. It's so much bigger than that. And winning those championships feels so much better too, when it's not just about you and your boys lifting up a trophy, but for that just greater community that you're playing with. And I think all that starts with the player to coach relationship and having that really in tune.
As you look back and think about the role rugby specifically has played in this, both from being your motivation early and your motivation late, and part of the reason that we're here, and however far the listenership is, rugby is not this like popular sport in the States.
Right.
Niche thing. You were fortunate that you went to a high school to have it. I would guess it's probably one of maybe 10 schools in the state that even have it. And then at the college level, probably similarly, there's not a ton of teams. So how would you say that niche opportunity in you having to figure out how to stay involved with this, because it's not like baseball, right? It's not like basketball where you can figure it out on every corner. How does that play into this whole thing as far as like being this kind of one-off situation that you opted into at an early age that probably has a much tighter community than the bigger sports that you're part of?
Oh yeah, it really does. It makes you feel like you're a part of a really special group, because if you're going around the street and you meet someone else who played high school football, it's whoop-de-doo. So did everyone. But if you meet someone who's a rugby player, you have something that you can really connect over, and the world gets so small. I was just having a conversation before this where I was like, have you heard of this guy? And it's, oh, heck yeah. Those things happen all the time. So that's always really cool. But then even like when I was talking about those post-game meals and stuff like that, and then once you're at like drinking age, people are going to bars and pubs and stuff like that. They're bending beers. They're talking about the game. That's something that's very unique to that sport and is strengthened by our smaller size here in America. it is a super fast growing sport, one of the fastest growing sports in North America right now, but it's small, it's tight. And that support just showed up in droves when I had my injury. And I got jerseys in my garage like stacked up to above my head from like the New Zealand All Blacks national team to like the Modesto Booze Hounds. Like men's, is it a drinking club? Is it a rugby team? We're not entirely sure. All of there just showed up to support me because this could have happened to any of us out there on the field. It happened to me, and people just feel a really strong obligation to support. And I know I certainly do too, where if this happens to a rugby player, we're going to push for law change and awareness that these laws are here for reasons and that serious things can happen on the field. So we can play very physical, but we need to play within the laws of the game and to just lend that support wherever possible. And I think that's something that's unique to rugby because it is such a small sport.
No, and it popped up for me early on as you were talking.
Yeah.
I coach at a school that has field hockey, that has water polo, and those are also
Mhm.
small. Everybody within the community, and this struck me the same way, and how that probably benefited you on your road to recovery rather than had this happen, say, playing football, which it does happen. But when I watched your video, at the end of it, you made a comment that was essentially, maybe this wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me. How do you
Yeah.
get to that point?
It has to be selfless. It absolutely must. Because if this was just all about me, then I don't think there's any way that I can say that. And I've had people advise me, like, you should never say that this wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to you or that you wouldn't trade this in because it just sounds like you're a lunatic or a liar. And I'm like, trust me, I'm not either. Let me share a story that like really changed it for me. Some of the context of it is that I used to coach youth rugby camps when I was playing rugby at Cal, come back to Sacramento, and age range was like 10 to 14 years old, kind of like middle school age. And there was this one camper there whose name was Talon. And he was one of the smaller kids on the field, but the kid just played with heart and everyone kind of roots for someone like that. And I remember I'd give him the ball and pick him up so he could go score. So imagine me, D1 athlete, I'm like bobbing and weaving in between a sea of 10-year-olds and I'm like face planting little Jimmy to the ground with a Heisman so that Talon could have his moment. And we shared this bond. And then come back to my injury. It's about 5 days later, and my high school is hosting a prayer service for me. They're praying for my healing and my strength. And then my dad shows me a picture on his phone of someone who I cannot recognize, but he is obviously fighting for his life. Probably like 15 years old. Hair is super white and sparse. Skin is very pale, just like a skeleton type body, skin and bones. And then my dad tells me that this kid is Talon, and Talon was fighting stage 4 cancer. And this picture had a caption from his mom, and it read along the lines of Talon wanted so badly to be at this prayer service to pray for Robert today, but he has to be in the hospital undergoing chemotherapy. And he's wearing his Jesuit rugby shirt that the team gifted him in his first round of chemo. And it's his goal that when he beats this cancer, he wants to go play rugby. And Robert inspired him to do that. And it closes with this sentence that's just seared into my soul. It just changed everything for me. And it said, "Stay strong and keep smiling, Robert. Your strength helps Talon stay strong too." I cried like a baby because I realized in that moment right there that overcoming this injury is not about me. It's about him. It's about all those people who are inspired when I fight another day. So, like we've discussed, this is not about me going from point A to point B on my feet anymore. It's about making a difference in people's lives. And I would never have been able to make a difference like that if this injury didn't happen to me. So, when I think of would you wish this injury away type of question, it's like, caveat, do I want to walk again? Hell yeah. I work at that every single day and I will not give up. But do I wish that this never happened to me? Absolutely not, because I'd wish away interactions like that and ability to inspire people that I wouldn't have had if the injury didn't happen. So that wasn't an easy thing. That wasn't like a decision or like a mindset that I came to like right away. But over time and the impact that I've seen that it's been able to make, it's really shifted it to where I'm like, this isn't all bad. Like in many ways, this injury is a gift.
Now, obviously, your situation is rather extreme,
Mm-hmm.
but as a candle to the kids that go through the pretty substantive injuries like a torn ACL, right?
Yep.
Shoulder dislocation, whatever it might be, right? Not talking about a sprained ankle, but
Yeah.
how would you take that realization that you now have, right?
Mhm.
Because this is going to sound awful, but I don't know how many people are writing saying, "Hey, your ankle injury really inspired me to do X." But they're still going through their
Yeah.
version of compared to what?
Yeah.
How would you share the wisdom you have now gained after 8 years for those that are in the midst of recovering from one of those more prevalent injuries? Because for
Mhm.
them, it's all black. This is horrible. I wish this never happened.
Yeah.
Give a little bit of that to both the athletes who might be listening and the coaches that are the support system for these
Mhm.
athletes that are going through this.
Yep. Yep. Number one, you got to focus on what you can control, and you got to be really intentional about that with your words. And I think it's totally fair to feel sorry for yourself, to feel frustrated and mad, but try not to give words to it, because you're just putting fuel on that fire. And that kind of pity party is just, it hasn't ever helped anybody. So focus on what you can control, only give words to those things. And I think that comes from a coach relationship too, to try and pivot that focus to, okay, what can we do? Hey, how's your rehab going? Did you see the trainer? What are they telling you? Stuff like that. Kind of like focus on, okay, like what's our task? What's our actual task at hand right here? And then I always found like the most motivating people on the sidelines were the people with injuries, actually. The people who got like a boot on, they're in crutches or something like that. And they're just going after it. And if you're in football, they're calling run and pass, and they're hyping guys up. And they're not just like totally detached from the team because they're injured. They've just become a different part of it. And they're a leader in a lot of regards. At the Cal Rugby team, we define leadership as the ability to make those around you better and more productive. Nothing to do with authority, nothing to do if you're the captain on the team or anything like that. Everything to do with just how you're producing to the success of the team and the people within it. So if you have an injury, you can still rally guys up, and you can still put in a good effort. How cool is it when you got someone who's got like a boot on their leg, but they're in the weight room and they're going just nuts on the bench press. They're doing everything that they can, and you see them getting after it. It's motivating for everyone. So I think like within that, would we all love to be on the field and totally healthy? Yeah. But injuries happen in sports. It's going to happen. And you just got to focus on what you can do in those situations to keep moving forward and find a way to lift up the players around you. It's going to be a real symbiotic relationship there that I think is going to help a player to be able to push through that. And then in the end, I think you find out that you're stronger than you ever thought you were, and you're just able to push harder and have more appreciation for when you are healthy on the field.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that's
Yeah.
super important advice in regards to what are the messages you're giving yourself, right? Because that's a
Yeah.
choice as well, right? The boohooing or, hey, listen, we're going to get through this day 2897, right?
That's
And
it.
whatever that looks
Yeah.
like in each of those injuries. Let's wrap up here with two things. Number one, what does the upcoming book tour look like? You said May 6th, the book's going to drop. But what are the details of that? Where can people find the book? Where can they find you doing presentations or more information if they want to get deeper into the story?
Yep, super excited about it. Book title is Paralyzed to Powerful, coming out May 6th. That is the 8-year anniversary of my injury. So going to be available everywhere you buy books online, Amazon, Barnes and Noble online, all the big boys. Going to be on my website as well, robertpaylor.com. If anybody wants a signed copy, they can go there. For speaking inquiries, same place, but also really want people to just connect on social media and stuff. Like I said, I'm posting these rehab videos. I think we all need an extra boost of positivity in our feeds. So I got a monopoly on the name Robert Paylor. There's not a lot of us out there. It's a different last name. So X, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, everywhere, Robert Paylor. I respond to every single message I receive. So would love to connect with anybody who's interested.
I appreciate that, Robert, and thanks for taking the time to come on. Looking forward to getting a copy of the book and sharing it with our athletes and the rest of this community.
You bet, Justin. Thanks for having me.